Welcome to Unbroken Arrows, Healing Through the Hunt. I'm Greg.
And I'm Catherine.
And Catherine is with us today on the phone, so she sounds a little bit more distant than she normally does. We are here at the USDA Service Center, and our guests today will be Amber Lively and Barry Berg, and they are both with the Big Sioux River Project. Before we get started on this, we'll be talking specifically about the Big Sioux River Project. But these types of projects are active throughout all of South Dakota, and in some form they take place basically all throughout the United States. The partnerships that are part of what we will be talking about today are going to be similar partnerships that are found in different parts of our country. And on their website, they have a link for cost share applications for landowners with the projects, specifically in this case, the Big Sioux River Project. But most likely, there's something available to you in the U.S. regardless of where you live when you're listening to this podcast. So, Amber, Barry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Hey, one of the things that I want to start with also here is you're going to be using a word, riparian, and that term is going to be used a lot in association with this project. And so when we read or hear about a riparian zone or a riparian buffer, what does that mean?
Well, a riparian area that we talk about is the transition zone between a body of water and the land. So most of what we'll be talking about is the area right along the riverbank that we're promoting things like buffers, which is another word we'll use quite a bit, which is basically a vegetated area along that riverbank.
Yeah, another thing about buffers is they are a very resilient zone, but if you don't take care of them correctly, they can really have detriments to water quality. And they're actually a natural filter for water coming off the landscape, and they trap nutrients and sediment that normally would flow into streams and cause problems with water quality. Also for wildlife, they are excellent travel corridors. Wildlife use them. They have what they need. They have the water there. Normally there's food nearby, and so they're very important for wildlife as well.
Okay, that's one of the things I wanted to mention also. We were next door neighbors at Pheasant Fest, where our booths were next door to each other, and we tried to get together there, but you were busy and we were busy. But that's another connection. Why would you be at Pheasant Fest? And that's exactly why. Those riparian zones, those buffers. My youth, I hunted pheasant probably 90% of the time before I was old enough to drive in those riparian zones right along where I grew up was in northeast Nebraska, and it's the Verdigris Creek. And I would say that probably for like 4 years or so, that's pretty much the only place I hunted, and it was a area rich of wildlife, not just pheasants. Everything,
right.
Everything.
And a lot of times that's the last place that's left. It's a waste ground, and as far as some people see it, I don't see it as a waste ground. I see it as a fragile environment that needs to be kept up. But those areas really do hold up if they have cattails in the wintertime and give wildlife a habitat in the winter to be able to survive if it gets nasty and you get a lot of snow and everything. They can get down and actually have some shelter from that. So they're important in that respect as well.
Absolutely. So now that we set the stage as to the purpose behind the podcast, tell us about the Big Sioux River Project.
So the Big Sioux River Project, like our name suggests, we focus on a portion of the Big Sioux River area. We focus on a portion of the Big Sioux River watershed. So now the Big Sioux River watershed is actually broken into three pieces. The upper, the central, and the lower Big Sioux area. We focus on the central and the lower Big Sioux watershed areas, and we use the blanket term Big Sioux River Project. There is another project very similar to ours, and then in the upper Big Sioux River area, that's called the Prairie Coteau Project. They do very similar things to us. Our territory extends from Esteline, South Dakota, down to the Iowa border there at North Sioux City, or Sioux City, Iowa. And what we focus on are water quality improvement projects. So we work with private landowners and municipalities to make recommendations on what we call best management practices, or BMPs, that improve the health of the water and have the additional side benefits of improving soil health, creating wildlife habitats, and really just creating a healthier, safer environment for everyone.
Okay. Now, the Big Sioux River is one that you said this particular project goes from Esteline down to North Sioux City, Iowa, and it runs right through Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And that's where we're based out of, is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So you're talking about the project is within rural areas and also urban areas. So you've got rural and urban watersheds. How are those managed differently?
Well, like you said, we work within the watershed itself. So it's not just the Big Sioux River. We also work with Split Rock Creek, Skunk Creek, all the major water water bodies in the area. And kind of the area that we focus on are what the state of South Dakota, the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, what they have listed as impaired. So that just means that they're currently not meeting the standards that the state has set for its designated beneficial use. So if that means that its current designated beneficial use is for kayaking and canoeing, or what we refer to as limited contact recreation, we work to make suggestions based on that particular water body that will help improve the impairment. So Skunk Creek, for example, we focus a lot on that. It is rated for limited contact recreation, so canoeing, kayaking, fishing, things of that nature. And what is specifically impaired for is E. coli. So it's a bacterial contaminant. We look at different contributors of bacteria. In rural areas, it tends to be more agricultural contributions, so runoff or direct contributions from livestock in the stream. But in urban areas, we tend to see contributions come from more of pet waste and runoff from yards. So what we do, or how we manage that, a lot of it is education. What is it that you're doing that could potentially be harming the watershed, and also, like Barry mentioned, we work directly with producers to say, here are some different programs that we offer. Here are cost share opportunities to help you get there. And we also have our own flagship program that has a significant financial benefit for enrollment in protecting these riparian areas.
Okay, the question that I think of as you were explaining that is there's going to be a very large difference between the management of the river, say, upstream of Sioux Falls than downstream, because you've got a completely different set of concerns as it goes through the city.
Right.
So is that more challenging for you as this project is continues to move forward, or is that something that's pretty similar no matter what you're talking about as far as a project similar to yours?
Well, the challenges exist as far as the project goes, being a voluntary project. There might be locations or tributaries or spots along the river that you really think that there's some impairments coming from, if there's extra E. coli from a feedlot or some other area, pasture, what it may be running into the river, and you want to see if you can work with that producer to address that concern. And now after COVID and stuff, prices of things have gone astronomically through the roof. And so, being voluntary, these guys, they have to, cover their bottom line and make sure that what they're doing is not going to kill their business as well. And so they've got to weigh it out. If I do this, it's going to cost me this much money. If I don't do it, I can still survive and get through some hard times or whatever. But we have cost share available, and that's the difference in the watershed. Upstream of Sioux Falls, we have dollars that are generated from the city of Sioux Falls. We have dollars that are generated from the city of Del Rapids from doing waste projects within the city limits. And those projects generate funds for the watershed project. And the stipulation with them is they have to benefit the municipality that generated the funds. So upstream of Sioux Falls, upstream of Del Rapids, even further up in the watershed, we can spend more money, or we have more money available to work with producers in those areas. Downstream of Sioux Falls, we don't really have a municipality that applies for the SRF NPS funds. That's the type of funds that they would apply for to do watershed work upstream of them. And so funds are a little more limited south of Sioux Falls or downstream of Sioux Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we have other funds and other grant sources that I write grants in through work, and we utilize those grants as well to fill in the gaps and try to get as much out there downstream as well. But we don't focus as much just because Sioux Falls is 0.0. I mean, the river runs all the way, it loops all the way through town. And if the river wasn't here, Sioux Falls wouldn't be here.
Right.
Basically, it's the heartbeat of Sioux Falls.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a push back in the early 2000s that people started realizing that how important this river was. And if you've been downtown, been down by Riverwalk, you will see all the changes. And people are finally coming around and realizing that this is the lifeblood of Sioux Falls. I mean, it's very important. And that's why a lot of the work is done upstream of Sioux Falls currently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would just add that I've been traveling I-29 all my life. And I'll be honest, for the most part, I stopped for gas or to grab a bite to eat. And I didn't really get to know Sioux Falls until recently. And it's a beautiful city. And that Big Sioux River running through it really has a lot to do with that, because the city has embraced that, and it's got hiking trails, and it has parks,
Right.
and it has all of those types of things. So there's our plug for Sioux Falls. If you're looking for a wonderful, beautiful place that's not too big in terms of population, but it's a great place to be. So correct me if I'm wrong, though, when you talk about the different, like you've got agriculture, you've got different things, so it goes through a city, so you've got different companies, businesses. The runoff, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's agriculture or businesses, is highly regulated, correct? I mean, they have to be aware of what types of things are being released into the environment, which would then, through groundwater movement, also make it to the river. Is that correct?
Yeah, in respect to that, there's two types of runoff or discharges into the river. And one is a point source, which is a highly regulated source that we know that this industry or this company is going to discharge into the river. Municipalities with their wastewater treatment facilities, they treat their waste in lagoons, and there is a discharge into the river. It has to adhere to a certain standard that has been set by the state for that facility. They have to abide by the state standard that gets set for their discharge, and they are a point source polluter. So basically, they're highly regulated. We also have the non-point source. Non-point source types of pollution are your front yard.
Sure.
You spread fertilizer out on your lawn and you leave a bunch on the sidewalk that can run off into the storm sewer, and it's a direct shot to the river. Non-point source out on the rural landscape are livestock feeding operations that do not have containment for the manure. Pastures that cattle may graze, it gets hot in the summertime, they go cool off, just like sending the kids to the pool.
Mm-hmm.
They like to swim in the stream to cool off as well.
Mm-hmm.
And crop fields that don't have any residue, we may get a storm that comes through, dumps a bunch of rain. It erodes the soil off the field. If it's not protected, that could run into the system. So those are types of unregulated non-point source pollution, and they both exist. One's regulated, one is not. The one that is not are the ones that we are working with to, try to work with them and get a management plan or get some type of buffer or some type of system in place so that those things don't occur.
Sure.
So what are some of the things that people can be doing as individuals to help with that?
So the type of things that people can do that we have our website set up for to have an application for are ag waste systems, which are putting in containment for their livestock facility. And by containment, I mean putting in ponds to hold their manure for the winter months so that it's not running off, or they don't have to spread it out on the snow and it has an opportunity to run off. So they put these ponds in to store their manure, then they can apply it correctly in the springtime and the fall, or building monoslope barns or barn structures to house the livestock inside with a pit system inside that stores the manure through the wintertime. And then you can apply that as well at times of the year when it's supposed to be done. Also, riparian buffers, the SRAM program, Seasonal Riparian Area Management, is the program that I developed in 2013. We rely on that a lot to do our buffers and put our riparian buffers in. We also have another sister program to that is the RAM program, and Riparian Area Management is the RAM program. The difference between the two is that it's implied in the name. Seasonal Riparian Area Management, it's a seasonal type management that we have with the program. RAM is just riparian area management. It acts more like CRP, where you put it into the program as a buffer, but you can go out there and hay it. That's a big difference there. CRP can't be hayed unless they release it for emergencies,
Right.
but RAM, they're allowed to go out there and hay it every year to maintain vigor for the plants, also help with weed suppression, things like that.
Mhm.
Seasonal riparian area management, we have the producer pull the cattle out of there April 1st to September 30th. So we have a deferred grazing period of 6 months. So they're not in there in the summertime. They can go in there in the summertime and they can hay it, but they can't graze it. After September 30th, they can do a light fall grazing, which the temperatures cooled down. And we also have to have a water tank available for those livestock on those pastures so that they're not just going in the stream, but the
Right.
temperatures cooled down. They aren't apt to go swimming. They drink out of the water tank, they graze it. It's good to have hooves out on those pastures because that hoof action actually helps
Sure.
move that soil around, and it's beneficial for pastures to have that. The buffalo did it.
Right.
So it's been going on forever. Other programs we do are filter strips. You can chime in here, Amber, if I'm missing a few here. But
no, actually, I was just going to focus a little bit on what everyday urbanites can do as well, because a lot of what we do does focus on agricultural areas, and we have incentive programs with ag producers. But like we mentioned, there is a large difference in what happens above Sioux Falls versus what happens in or below Sioux Falls as far as contributions are concerned. And the big thing that happens in urban areas is pet waste contribution.
Sure.
So as simple of a process as it may sound, picking up after your dogs, not letting it sit in your yard, because as Barry mentioned, once that rainfall comes down, everything gets washed off of your yard and into the storm drains, and that contributes directly into the river. Planting native landscaping in urban areas can also help out a lot. Again, we talk about the deep root system of native plants having that great benefit of soil stabilization as well as filtration. So again, there's lots of things that people can do both in urban and agricultural areas, and it all kind of starts at home. If you have a yard, clean up after your yard. And if you do live adjacent to the river, make sure that you are doing things that help to stabilize that riverbank. One problem that we've seen in Sioux Falls is with yard clippings kind of being thrown onto a hillside. And what that does is it actually creates an environment where that hillside continues to erode and sediment is added into the river. And sedimentation is one of the things that we see an issue, suspended solids or in the river. So cleaning up after your pets, planting native landscaping, disposing of lawn clippings appropriately, not letting those storm drains get clammed up with litter and debris. All of those things have a huge benefit for what ends up in the river and how that impacts water quality too.
Okay, and I'd like to make a little bit of a plug here. In my teaching and administrative career, I probably spent maybe 2/3 of that career in rural areas. And you mentioned the different things in the programs available for agriculture versus the things in an urban setting. Oftentimes people might falsely think that a large farming operation just puts down whatever they want, whenever they want, as far as fertilizer and those kinds of things. They need to be certified, they need to get permits, and they're applying those things based upon the regulations that are best for the land.
Correct.
Now, Joe, what would be
Joe Farmer?
No.
Joe Q Public?
Yeah,
Oh,
Joe
Joe
Q
Q
Public in town, puts down his lawn fertilizer, and boy, that just didn't turn green enough, so I'm going to put some more down. So in the urban areas, sometimes that's a much more concentrated pollutant, I guess, maybe, or input of the chemicals.
Sure.
And sometimes people don't realize that.
Sure.
That they think that it's really a big farm situation where that's where those pollutants or those chemicals are coming from, and it's really not. Percentage wise, or in terms of the land area of your yard at your house is much more concentrated than, say, 80 acres.
Right.
So you have to be very careful. So what I'm saying is, John Q. Public, if you're putting fertilizer down, read the bag and make sure that you apply it as you're supposed to, and not just whatever you think it is. It's because that's part of the regulation with agriculture. A lot of my friends and people that I know that are in agriculture, they spend a lot of time making sure that they're certified and they have the permits and that they need to do so. It's
Right.
very important.
Yeah, and to add to that, there's not a farmer out there that's going to go throw extra fertilizer out there just because he can. When you're spreading fertilizer over 80, 160, 320 acres of land, it's expensive real fast. And you've got to weigh that versus what bushel yield you're going to make. And yes, a lot of these guys have nutrient management plans that are put together through NRCS, and they follow a nutrient plan. They know what they're going to spread per acre. We got precision farming where they can shut off booms and apply fertilizer to pieces of ground that may need it more than other pieces of ground.
Right.
And so a lot of stuff is being driven now with GPS, where they can drive GPS. It'll shut it off for waterways. It'll shut it off next to the riparian areas. And so, yes, they're doing stuff correctly. A lot of the larger livestock operations, when they get permitted, they get over a certain number for the county or for the state, 1,000 animal units. They need to apply for a permit and get permitted by the county and the state. And so then once they get permitted, they do have to follow those regulations. And so they've now become, from a non-point source pollution perspective, they've become a point source polluter, because they've said we're over 1,000 now. They're highly regulated. They have to follow nutrient management plans. They have to follow the rules. They have to follow pest control, flies, everything. I mean, it really gets in depth for what they have to do and follow those correctly. So there's a lot involved. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Amber, you're the educational outreach coordinator. So, and you do a lot just as within the Big Sioux River Project in education. So who are your targets for your educational outreach?
One of the big focuses that we have is starting to get people to care about the river at a young age. So, for example, this week, I'm speaking to fourth graders at the Sioux Empire Water Festival. And so getting people in fourth grade thinking about the river, thinking about how they impact the river, thinking about things like fertilizer, and thinking about looking for other contributors, like a leaky car engine, for example, and the oil that could contribute. And also, we've done a lot of work talking to high schools, to middle schools, and to college-age individuals, presenting different perspectives on either water quality issues or getting them to understand a little bit more about the watershed and caring about all of its inhabitants, including pheasants, including salamanders, including all of the things that rely on good water quality. And one of the great things that we were able to do last year was also do outreach with producers. So we, on one of our riparian areas that we've had in the program for 10 years, we hosted a
grazing event.
Yeah, a field day.
Riparian grazing, yeah.
A field day for producers. So we brought people that lived or owned land along Skunk Creek together with our partner agencies like NRCS, the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. We brought them all together with the City of Sioux Falls and other partners that have helped us financially or have similar programs. And we showed them what is possible on a buffer. Not just the native grasses that come back, the legumes like red clover that we were seeing on these buffer strips, but also had an opportunity for them to talk to other producers that had been in the program and talk about the benefits that they had seen. And also, I think that helps to provide an insider perspective to a lot of the community. We are outsiders. We aren't producers that own land along the water, own land along the river. But we work directly with producers and we hear their stories. And so giving them an opportunity to amplify their experiences was something we were really proud to be able to offer last year. So bringing that producer outreach component into it was something that we're really excited to continue to do in years to come. And then it also opened the doors for us to be able to work with South Dakota State University and bring a classroom out to the same riparian area.
Nice.
Yes, it was fantastic. And so we had 60 students that all had varying majors from wildlife, ag, and communications, some other educators and things like that, out to this plot of land to see the diverse habitat that we had created. And we challenged them to go find plant and animal species and that all 60 of them try and find a different plant or animal to identify.
Nice.
And they did it.
I bet. That, probably not too difficult, to be honest. Yeah.
It absolutely was not. And one of the things that was surprising to me is they found praying mantis out there.
Yeah.
And, with some of the species that we don't think of being in and along the river here in eastern South Dakota, but things like salamanders, which breathe through their skin and really need that good oxygen-rich water in order to be able to inhabit the watershed. Somebody found an eastern tiger salamander. And so that was a really exciting thing to see that to us is an indicator of the good water quality that we have.
Right. Amphibians are a tremendous indicator with regard to the health of the water system.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Right.
Last year, we had an opportunity to, like we said, honor the 10-year milestone for the SRAM program. And we wanted to see what it had really meant for water quality improvements on Skunk Creek. So we contacted the Department of Ag and Natural Resources and said, can we have the data that shows what we've been doing over time? Like, how often are we meeting the standards or how often are we not meeting the standards that you've set for water quality? And since Skunk Creek is impaired for E. coli, we wanted to specifically zero in on when we were meeting or not meeting the standards for E. coli. And when we started the SRAM program 10 years ago, we were not meeting the water quality standards for E. coli 60% of the time, so quite often. But in 2023, those numbers were 11% of the time we were not meeting the standards. So we've made significant improvements in E. coli levels. And the really exciting thing for us is within the next 5 to 10 years, we could be meeting standards on Skunk Creek. And then that has great implications for what we're doing for the Big Sioux River as a whole. And the watershed overall, that we're getting that much closer to making the water cleaner and safer for everyone who lives in the watershed.
Right.
Yeah, and if you follow the water quality news or buzz, you'll see that Skunk Creek or the Big Sioux River is failing for meeting its standard. And that's basically what South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources has, because they don't want to get into specifics and have to do all the data crunching. So it's either a pass fail with them.
Okay.
So it meets the criteria, means it passes. It does not meet, it fails. Nobody knows where exactly that is. So yeah, as Amber said, we went through and we crunched last year's data or 20 years of data on Skunk Creek. and pulled that out to see what it would look like. And it looks really promising. And you got to realize that the Big Sioux River and Skunk Creek and the tributaries around here, they're not toxic. A lot of people may hear from somebody that, oh my God, it's polluted, but it's bad. That's bad. They don't know what the pollutants are. And as Amber said before, total suspended solids, which is a lot of sediment in the water, and E. coli bacteria are two pollutants. We don't have arsenic, selenium,
Right.
a lot of some of the other pollutants that other states deal with that have mining out east, and just other things aren't there. It's just the two pollutants, which when you're having contact with water, you're playing in it or fishing or even immersion recreation, which is swimming, there's a limit, there's a standard set for
Right.
if it's safe to do that. And if the numbers are elevated above that, then chances are if you're doing that activity, you could get sick. It's not saying you're going to, because there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria.
Right.
Some of the bad stuff you don't want. And of those big numbers that we measure, if there's happens to be some bad bacteria in there and you happen to be in the water and ingest that bacteria, you could get sick. So there's safety protocols that we talk about to put on the website. And we've been trying to, figure out how we should do this and yet still be, neutral about it. But if you're going to have activities that you want to do on the river, goof around and wade and canoe and kayak, don't do it when it's flooding. And that's dangerous anyways.
Right.
And you may not want to do it when the water's super low and stagnant and not really moving. But when it's normal, most of the time, a majority of the time, it's fine.
healthy.
It's
Yes.
meeting its standard at those periods.
And just using smart judgment, right? If you're out hunting and fishing and you're, touching things along the water, sanitize your hands before you eat, things like that. Wear proper footwear, because even if you're in a glacial stream, there's potential for sharp rocks or fishing hooks or something else. So we try to promote people to engage with the river responsibly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, Barry, you mentioned that on average, people probably don't know exactly what these things are, these contaminants are. Something people may be familiar with, because every year you hear it, are algal blooms. The algae, blue-green algae
Right.
is something that in swimming areas in particular, they'll say, don't go swimming now. E. coli is something any mammal has in its gut. So
Yeah.
it's not like this, real rare thing that's in the environment. It's
Right.
not. All of us have E. coli. But on your website, some of the things that you have are just, to me, amazing. Just one that talks about over 27,000 pounds of sediment prevented from entering the river each year, and to put that into perspective, that's over 1,800 mid-sized dump trucks full of sediment.
Right.
And, those kinds of things, it talks about, how many pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus and all of those kinds of things that are through this program and the development of those riparian buffers are preventing entering into that watershed. And
Right.
I think those things are just amazing, and people need to take the time to really understand what that impact is.
Right. And if you read it, it's one thing, but to understand it, like you said, is another thing. Because if I had a dump truck, as many dump trucks on there, just pull up to a bridge and dump it over the bridge and have people watching that, they'd get the real idea then.
Exactly.
And if you had that many dump trucks dumping fertilizer in there,
Holy cow.
you'd also see it. But the nitrates, people talk about nitrates, and people have seen it in the news with Des Moines, Iowa, that nitrates are an issue with drinking water, and they are. Once you get nitrates in the water, they're very, very difficult to get back out of the water to treat the water,
And costly.
and costly to get it below 10 parts per million for a drinking water standard. Now, in the Big Sioux River and the tributaries, we've got the monitoring sites set up, and a majority of the time, the river's flowing at about 1 to 2.5 parts per million of nitrate. So we don't have nitrates as an issue in South Dakota like Minnesota has nitrates and Iowa has nitrates for an issue, which is a good thing. And, there might be some people out there that listen to this and say, oh, he's going off a little bit now, but field tile
Sure.
really is a conduit for increasing nitrates. We don't have a ton of tiling done in South Dakota, which is has helped us. We also have a good portion of our wetlands left in South Dakota. You go to Minnesota and Iowa, they've been drained. They're a natural filter. They filter out those pollutants, and you just don't get them in the water as high because they get used up by the cattails and the vegetation in the wetlands, and they do what they're supposed to do. And so that's another benefit. Also a benefit of the riparian areas. There's been some studies on denitrification of water passing through buffers and how much nitrogen those buffers can take out of water moving into a water body. I haven't really dug into them, but there's been some good talk about that they do a lot with pulling out the nitrates, trying to get into the system. So
Since you mentioned the conceptualizing what some of these numbers look like, when we talk about how much E. coli has been removed from the watershed because of the practices, it's next to impossible to try and understand what a quadrillion looks like.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I had a demonstration a few years ago where somebody showed me what 54 trillion looked like, and they said basically if you took a dollar bill and stacked dollar bills on top of each other, it would create the Manhattan skyline. And that's trillion. So quadrillion is just nearly impossible for us to try and fathom. But you know, removing all this E. coli, that's making the rivers that much safer, much healthier for all of us. You can see the proof is kind of in the landscaping. Like I mentioned, you go out to these buffered areas and you see evidence of a lot of different wildlife. We see evidence of beavers and fox and otter, and we also see multiple bird species. Barry and I were doing a site inspection, and we got startled by a couple deer that were bounding through these really thickly vegetated areas that, you know, we had no idea that they were there until they bounced away from us.
Sure.
And wildlife, vegetation, they're not going to pop up if there's not a healthy environment for them to be there. And so some of these areas that really only had weeds and non-native grasses before now have these really rich native vegetation.
Or no grass.
Exactly.
Right.
Bare dirt that had been trampled and, you know, had absolutely no biodiversity. Now we're seeing multiple grass species, native grasses and flowers, and the South Dakota state flower, the pasque flower, popping up in some of these fields and things of that nature. And then seeing the wildlife tracks. It's such a positive thing that even if we can't conceptualize what a quadrillion colony forming units of bacteria look like, we can see that it's now healthier and these other species are coming back.
Sure. It's like you're reading my notes, Amber. Perfect segue here, you know, so I appreciate that. Again, I talked a little bit earlier about how sometimes making connections in terms of, okay, why are we talking to these folks? And with the Unbroken Arrows podcast, Healing Through the Hunt, you know, that's our title. And yeah, hunting is important to us. But being outdoors is so very important, whether it's fishing, whether it's hunting, hiking, kayaking, canoeing, anything that you can do outside. And it doesn't have to be big water. You know, Lake Ponson's a big lake north of here. The Missouri River, the Mississippi River to our east, but that's big water. The Big Sioux River is not big water,
Right.
but there are plenty of recreational opportunities there. And I mentioned earlier, I grew up in northeast Nebraska. The Verdigris Creek growing up was my sanctuary. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent there.
Sure.
But and now I'm going to get a little bit up on a peach crate before we get into those different outdoor activities. But any water. I was honored and privileged that my Uncle George took me under his wing. He wasn't a river rat, but he did enjoy the river and fished the Missouri River a lot.
Sure.
But one of the things he taught me was respect the water, respect the river. Any water, lakes, rivers, streams, moving water has hazards, snags, things like that are under the water that you can't see.
Yes.
And it takes time to observe, learn, and be able to read the river for those types of safety concerns. So that's what I want to make sure that everybody understands, that when you become active in an outdoor activity, it is not without risk. and even in a smaller moving water like the Big Sioux River, there are things that you need to make sure that you understand and be aware of.
Right, right.
So, what about the outdoor activities, the things that a person can do? Barry, you were talking about fishing.
Right. Yep.
When we talked over the weekend, and I asked about kayaking and those kinds of things. So, are there areas that are that people can access the Big Sioux River? What are the things that people need to be aware of with regard to, because this is still private land,
Right.
on these riparian areas that you're working with. So let's just go there with regard to the outdoor recreation.
Sure. Well, and you started with, the inherent dangers you get out in the wild. I mean, that's there. And even though the Big Sioux River, one of the beneficial uses of it is immersion recreation in this area, once you get to Del Rapids and south, doesn't mean that it's inherently safe to do it.
Right.
I mean, people drown in swimming pools and they have lifeguards and they have people watching and the water's clear. You can see all the way to the bottom and it still happens. Now you got the river that has extra sediment in it. It's cloudy. It's turbulent. You got snags. Amber had mentioned, there might be somebody that threw a bottle in there and it broke and there's glass on the bottom, hooks, logs, things like that. So yes, there is an inherent risk with going into those areas and they should be treated as so. And what we tell people, if you have apprehensions of swimming in a swimming pool, then don't go swim in the river.
Right.
I'd rather have you go to the swimming pool first and learn there. But as far as the canoeing and kayaking, the groups like the Kayak Association, Friends of the Big Sioux, those individuals have started work on trying to put in some areas that they may have a partnership with a producer or landowner that is a put-in site for canoeing and kayaking on the river. There may be some obstacles from one to the other. If you're traveling from one site and floating downstream per se, you may run into a fence or something that's across the river. So there's another hazard. It's a navigable water. The producer shouldn't have the fence there, but there are fences. If they have them, they should have a gate or some type of area that you can pass through. But a lot of times that might not be the case. So you have to kind of pay attention to that. But as far as other sites, Game Fish and Parks has some landings in some spots. The city, I know, has a few spots that are city ground that a person's able to put a kayak in. But I'm not well versed as far as up into, let's say, Moody County or Brookings County. If there's some spots, maybe Amber has an idea of what's there, but they have been working on getting more of those. It kind of was a really big push for a while, but then it's kind of went quiet here recently from what I've been hearing. So
another thing that started to pop up a lot more is different types of recreation on the lakes. So not just the river, but there's some private classes that are offered for things like learning how to do stand-up paddleboard and find some new ways to enjoy some of the lakes. Of course, there's always opportunities to train your dog on. I know Lake Alvin has an area where they encourage you to, throw, do like what's it called, Barry?
throw a dummy.
Yeah, throw a dummy and for your dog, and do some of that into the water. And so there's some great opportunities that may not be officially promoted, but like in Sioux Falls, for example. Down by Lake Lorraine, there's stand-up paddleboard rentals and kayaks and canoes. So if you're not quite ready to try it out on the river yet, you can at least learn in Sioux Falls on how to do that. And then
And Family Park.
Yeah, Family Park has some great opportunities there.
Kayaking,
The Del Rapids has their new climbing opportunities right along the river. So there's still things that maybe aren't in the river, but are still enjoying it and recreating along the river and appreciating the beauty that is the Big Sioux River. So there's a lot more things that are popping up all the time. And a lot of that, is because of the work that our organization and other organizations like ours are doing to really talk about what's going on in the river, and that there are efforts being done to promote or to improve water quality. and to help people make more informed decisions about that. Like you mentioned, letting people know that it's something that you have to work up to. If you're not comfortable with water, try something that's a little clearer first. Try a swimming pool. But if you get to that point, there's great opportunities at the Palisades State Park to really be able to canoe and kayak, and they do some safety drills and things like that. I think the Canoe and Kayak Association you mentioned, they do some great safety drills up at the Palisades State Park up there. There's hiking and climbing all throughout the watershed. So even if you're not quite ready to get into the water, there are opportunities to enjoy the riverfront.
Right. Get started somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So outdoor recreation, as you've just shared, has a lot of different options. What about fishing? Is there a healthy fish population in different parts of the Big Sioux?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fish population, we've got different species in the river: catfish, walleye, northern pike, smallmouth bass. There's certain other species too, and different types of minnows and things like that. And that's one part of the scare with, the river's polluted, so if I go catch a fish on there, the fish is going to be polluted and I can't eat it, and the fish are no good in the Big Sioux. Well, that's far from the truth. There have been mercury recommendations put out there on the river because they found fish with higher mercury in their tissues. And one thing about that is the mercury that's in these water bodies. There's just about every water body that has some effect by mercury.
I was going to say that's a pretty common. You
Yep.
see that sign nearly every place you fish. Is
Yep.
that
Absolutely.
mercury content is a little high.
Yep. And the Mississippi River, same thing. It's high in mercury, so it has mercury consumption advisories on it as well. And they tell you that you can have 7 ounces of fish once every 3 weeks or something like that. And so Big Sioux River, there's segments that are fine that don't have a listing, and there's other segments, which is a certain distance of the river that they break up distances on the river.
Okay.
That's what I mean by segments. But there are certain segments, let's say Moody County, the segment that's in Moody County could have a mercury advisory on it. Well, the reason why it does is because they probably went out there and sampled and caught their limit of, or their number of fish that they needed for the sample, which minimum of 20. And they have to be larger than whatever average that they have.
Right.
So it's adult fish because mercury bioaccumulates.
Right. It accumulates. Right.
And so the smaller fish are fine. But even a larger fish, if you keep a larger fish out of the river, they're fine to consume as well, just knowing that you don't have them, 4 or 5 times a month. And even then, I don't know. It just depends on the fish. But it's funny because you put a mercury advisory on a portion of the river and yet the river flows. You got to assume that it's flowing down and it's everywhere.
And the
just
fish
gonna
move.
stay,
Yeah, sure.
It's not like a little house there.
Yeah. And so, but the opportunities for fish are awesome. I used to fish it when I was going to college at SDSU, and I would fish up and down from north of Bruce all the way down here to Sioux Falls in different areas. You can find a little channel or a deeper pool somewhere, and there's some awesome fishing that you can do on the river. I mean, I've got some producers that have their favorite spots. Of course, they can go back on their back 40 and throw in a hook where no one else can.
Right.
And they pull out 35, 40-pound catfish. I mean, it's incredible some of the pictures they got.
Wow.
And people wouldn't even realize that, oh my God, that a fish that big lives. Yeah,
Right.
they do. And there's some awesome northern in there. I've caught 15 to 20 pound northerns on the Big Sioux River, beautiful walleyes, great eating fish. And I've caught plenty and I've eaten plenty out of the river, and I'm still here.
Right. Well, and the thing about that too is that sometimes I think there's a misconception that, I want to get active in fishing, or, so I need to buy a boat, and you don't need to.
No.
You can even fish from a kayak if you want to, but bank fishing is good fishing as well. What do
Right,
they
right.
say? The worst day of fishing is still better than the best day of work.
Yeah.
That's from the bank. It's the same way.
I grew up fishing from the bank a lot, and And yeah, it's awesome. The resources there, it's available to do and doesn't cost you much, if you get a
Right.
kayak a little bit more, but
Mhm,
fish and
mhm.
pole and a lot of times if you're looking at a spot maybe to go out on some land that's not public, you can ask the landowner for permission if
Sure.
you'd be able to walk down the bank and fish. And more times than not, you'd be surprised. They'll say, yeah, go ahead. And,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
especially if you got a kid with you.
Yeah,
Take a kid
exactly.
fishing, that
You
pulls at
bet.
their heartstrings. They're like, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
You
So
bet.
I remember growing up, my brother and I would ride our bikes to the floodgates and just fish off the floodgates.
Oh, that's so much fun.
And what I was going to say was also bait isn't even necessarily sometimes something you have to go look for, because if you fish the hatch or use grasshoppers are going to be around.
yeah,
Grasshoppers catch a lot of fish.
June
yeah.
bugs,
June bugs, sure,
frogs.
absolutely. Yeah. So the future of the Big Sioux River project. First off, what about different partnerships? Do you have groups that come in and volunteer or help the landowners with different projects or help you with different projects?
Well, since we work in the USDA Service Center here in Sioux Falls, we work pretty close with NRCS.
Okay.
And so we send producers back and forth, kind of like Gerald Duvall that
Mhm.
met with you
Yep.
this past weekend at
Right.
Pheasant Fest.
Mhm.
But we send producers back and forth. If I don't have a program that fits for them, then I'll send them to NRCS, and chances are they'll have that program that fits for them.
Sure.
If they don't have a program, vice versa, they'll send them to us.
Mhm.
And so that partnership works out very well. We can do some things that they can't do, and they can do some things that we can't do. And they have more money usually. Um, at times we get an influx of money from the city of Sioux Falls if they do some big improvement around the city, and we've got 5 years to spend it. And so, we've got to be innovative. We got to stay at the front of the things that are being done, because a lot of times if there's a program that's been out there for a lot of years and it hasn't changed payment rates or anything,
Mhm.
hasn't changed, a lot of times producers will be like, yeah, I've done that before,
Mhm.
and I don't really want to do it again. I want to do something different in tillage equipment, technology, everything's advancing. So if you don't stay up with that, then you kind of fall behind. And so we've got the Soil Health Coalition that works with cover crops and different things for soil health, tillage, and things like that. You've got Game Fish and Parks that works with
Okay.
strictly with wildlife and wildlife plantings, trees, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, our tool belt, we have our programs that we push. Basically, our kindred program is the SRAM program, but now that we've teamed up with South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources with the RBI, we've got that in our tool belt, but we also have the different agencies. And
And the county conservation districts for seeding and planting
Yeah.
and trees
Okay.
and that sort of thing as
yeah,
well.
once we implement the practice, the SRAM practices or RAM or whatever it may be, they may need to put in grass to establish a grass stand. So the conservation district here in Minnehaha County, they go out and they seed it, or if the producer wants trees
Mhm.
next to riparian areas, because I am going to give back, and I want to give that 2% or 1% of my land back to wildlife.
Sure.
I want to build deer habitat.
Mhm.
Okay. Have the conservation district work out a tree plan and go out there and install trees and fabric and the whole 9 yards, and they'll do that and provide that service. And yeah, I mean, everything just evolves around all the partnerships and
Mhm.
everybody working
Mhm.
together. So
And for our non-financial partnerships as well, we constantly get asked, I don't own land, I live in the city, but I want to get involved in helping out the river. What can I do?
Mhm.
And so we have a couple of local nonprofit organizations that we're familiar with and that have a shared mission in wanting to clean up the river. The Isaac Walton League, they do the Save Our Streams program. They'll do water sampling as well as wildlife record keeping.
Mhm.
And so we refer people to the Isaac Walton League as well as Friends of the Big Sioux River. They're a big advocacy group who organize river cleanups. Like they have one that they partner with the city of Sioux Falls on Earth Day,
Mhm.
and they have 13 different locations, not just in Sioux Falls, but Watertown, Aberdeen. They continue to expand up and down the watershed where people can get dirty and get into the river and, get up close and personal and see the human impact on water quality, removing debris, and helping to make habitats better for the fish and the amphibious creatures that live there, removing things like plastic bottles and litter. And one year we pulled out a carpet. So, I mean, you'd just be surprised at what there is to all remove from the river. And sometimes it's, it's an accident, flooding happens and it takes things out of people's yards. But other times there's more direct contributions, people being careless with park bench litter and things like that. And it's a great reminder that we all have an impact. Even if we're not contributing on our yards, if we're not contributing because of the operation that we have, we're not a point source polluter or a non-point source polluter, but sometimes we still get careless and have an impact on the river. And so organizations like Friends and organizations like Isaac Walton League really help to engage the public and have more opportunities for volunteering.
Okay.
Yeah, and other organizations that may ask for some advice or help or ask what we should do with some certain job that they're doing or whatever down at River Walk or anywhere downtown may come to us and say, hey, we want to put up some information on the river and, what has been done and what are some milestones that you guys have done through the project, or we want to put up a sign that says pick up your pet waste, and we want to put a barrel there for them to throw and have a bag dispenser and throw the bags here. And I mean, Amber's done that stuff and worked with those individuals to, how to design it and where to put it and things like that.
Right.
So,
well, speaking of Amber, and this is something that I learned before we started to record, but and it's even tougher because you hear the enthusiasm in your voice when you talk about what you're doing here at the Big Sioux River Project. But Amber is moving on. Amber is going to be taking a job in Pennsylvania, and that means that I don't know if the search has started now or if it's going to be starting soon. You're going to be looking for an educational outreach coordinator. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, it's a very passion-filled job. We're looking for a passionate person who wants to engage with the community and help inspire the next generation of people caring about the river, as well as helping to support and uplift the work that Barry's doing with direct producer outreach. And yeah, the search is going to start here very soon.
yeah.
So by the time this podcast is released, I'm sure we'll have an application out on our website, or they can reach out to us at Big Sioux River Project at gmail.com.
Okay.
Very easy email to remember, Big Sioux River Project at gmail.com. And just send a resume and let us know that you're interested and that you've got a passion for water quality in South Dakota.
And this position is not a remote position. It's something that they would have to live in South Dakota. So listeners from all over the country, if they're interested in moving, I already made the plug for Sioux Falls,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
They may want to move here after we got done talking.
That's
to them.
right. That's right.
Hell.
You never know. But anyway, Amber, best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Only just got to know you a little over a week, right?
Yeah.
But
and it's neat, to have that I&E aspect of the project. We never really pushed that back in the day because it was get out there and get the work done. Get out there. Now we've been successful enough and doing different things that, okay, we'll let you do an I&E person and do that portion of it, which should have been always done, but with a little more vigor. And it's neat when you go out to a producer that's a young producer, maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, that said, I remember when I was in 4th grade going to the Big Sioux Water Festival.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow,
Yeah.
we've reached back that far because, they've been going on for
30. This will be 31 years with the Water
31
Festival.
years.
right.
So, I mean, that's reached a lot of people.
Right. Or just striking the tugging on the heartstrings or whatever, like me, growing up in the Verdigris Creek. I mean, that's something that it's been part of my life, my entire life. And so any type of project like this is something that I really, really can take a hold of and love to promote. So
Yeah, and young kids, I mean, that was our playground too. I mean, being out at the farm, sneak off and go out to the creek out there
Mhm.
and play around and try to build a dam in it to dam up water. That didn't really work because we didn't have the right tools. But
Sure,
I mean, it was fun
But
trying.
you tried.
We tried.
More than once, I bet.
And we screwed around in there so much and,
Yeah.
and messed around, and it was fun to do, nowadays with social media and iPads and the electronic devices, kids don't get out there enough, and they need to start getting out there
And
because
that's what the educational outreach
Yeah.
Absolutely.
exposes them to. It's awesome.
you bet.
If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, and I'm thinking here, boy, it would be a tremendous benefit of maybe landowners between south of Sioux Falls all the way down to North Sioux City. If somebody's listening and wanted to learn more about maybe enrolling in any of these programs, Barry, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would just simply have them email me at my email address, which is my name, Barry, BARRY .Berg, BERG, at sd.nacdnet.net. It's a mouthful.
Sure.
That's why we have the Big Sioux
That's
River
why we
Project
have-
at Gmail.
Yep. Or you could email the project
Sure.
and send an email that way, and we'll get you either way. But
If I'm not mistaken, you're on the contact information on the webpage, right? You're
Yes.
on the Big Sioux River
Yeah.
Project
and
webpage.
if you do go to bigsiouxriver.com and go to the webpage, I believe my number, my work number is
Yeah,
on
your
there.
your cell phone
So-
number's on there, as is your email address. So we make it really easy to get a hold of
Yeah.
us. Barry's always got his cell phone on him, and he's happy to answer questions and get more people interested and excited about conservation practices, getting outdoors, and learning more about how they can be a mutually beneficial experience. Like I said, we've got a lot of incentive programs out there that help provide financial incentive for landowners to enroll in some of these projects as well. And there'll also be contact information for the next education and outreach person on there if you're an educator or somebody that has an interest in bringing watershed education to your classroom as well.
Thank you both, Barry and Amber. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amber, best of luck
Thank you, Grace.
to you in the
Appreciate it.
future. And I hope that we are able to continue to make awareness of the Big Sioux River Project something that stays in the forefront rather than just a one and done. If you or someone you know is thinking of suicide or in need of crisis intervention, call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. There are resources available to help. So to all of our listeners, take some time to get outside, get outdoors, and experience its healing powers. With that, on behalf of Catherine and me, until next time.